There is a silent truth that Carl Jung spent much of his life exploring, and it remains one of the most profound principles for understanding emotional suffering. Pain, especially emotional pain, does not arise only from what happens to us. It grows and persists because of the way we relate to it, the way we carry it, and the way we unconsciously repeat it. Jung taught that the psyche, when left unexamined, traps itself in cycles. It repeats what it cannot integrate, it projects what it cannot accept, and it suffers what it refuses to face. Think about your own life for a moment. How many times have you found yourself in the same kind of conflict, the same kind of heartbreak, or the same kind of disappointment? It almost feels as if life is conspiring against us, giving us the same lesson over and over, just with different faces and situations. But Jung would say, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is the starting point, to recognize that what feels like fate is often the shadow at work, the hidden part of us that seeks expression through repetition. Emotional pain is rarely just about the surface wound. If someone betrays us, the pain is not only in the betrayal itself, but also in the memories it awakens, the unresolved hurts from childhood, the silent fears of abandonment, the doubts about our own worth. The psyche, Jung explained, is like a mirror that reflects back not only the present, but also the unhealed past. That is why suffering often feels heavier than the moment that triggered it. Now, the spiritual principle that breaks this cycle is not to escape pain, not to suppress it, not to distract ourselves from it. Instead, it is to enter into relationship with it. Jung's psychology teaches that integration, not avoidance, is the path to wholeness. To integrate means to listen to what the pain is trying to show us, to allow it to transform us rather than to trap us. This is not easy. Our culture teaches us to escape discomfort, to look away, to numb ourselves. But Jung believed that the soul grows in those very places where the ego resists. Pain becomes a teacher, a doorway, if we dare to meet it with awareness. And here lies the principle. Emotional pain breaks its cycle when it is brought into consciousness, when we stop identifying with it and instead witness it. Imagine the difference. When you are angry and consumed by rage, you are identified with it. You say, "I am angry." But when you bring awareness to it, you step back slightly and say, "I notice that anger is moving through me." That small shift changes everything. You are no longer the anger itself. You are the witness of it. This act of awareness, simple but profound, is what Jung pointed toward as the path of individuation, becoming who we truly are by facing, integrating, and transcending the unconscious. This principle becomes spiritual because it aligns with a deeper truth. Suffering loses its power when we stop resisting it. Resistance keeps pain alive. Acceptance transforms it. Jung once observed that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. In other words, the unresolved shadows of one generation echo in the next until someone has the courage to face them. And when we accept to face them, we not only free ourselves but also those who come after us. Pause here and think. How often do you carry emotional burdens that were never truly yours? Perhaps the patterns of fear, shame, or guilt were inherited from your environment, your family, or your culture. By becoming conscious of them, you begin to break the cycle. That is the spiritual principle. Awareness dissolves repetition. Now, if you're listening to this, I invite you to reflect deeply. Do not just consume these words, apply them. Ask yourself, what is the one emotional pain that repeats most often in my life? Is it betrayal, loneliness, rejection, or inadequacy? Bring it to mind. Do not run away from it this time. Instead, observe it. Ask it, what are you trying to show me? What lesson do you carry? This is how the cycle begins to dissolve, not by force, but by awareness. And if this resonates with you, take a moment to commit to this channel, to subscribe, because here we go beyond surface level motivation. We explore the depths of the human psyche, the truths that Carl Jung and many other thinkers devoted their lives to uncovering. So make sure you stay with me until the end, because the insights ahead might just shift the way you understand your pain forever. When Jung spoke of the unconscious, he did not mean just a hidden storage of forgotten memories. He meant a living force, a reality that shapes how we perceive and act, even when we are unaware. Emotional pain, in this sense, is not only a personal experience, but also an expression of the unconscious trying to reach the surface. It demands recognition. The unconscious wants to be made conscious, and it does so through dreams, symbols, relationships, and yes, through suffering. Consider how often our relationships mirror back our hidden wounds. You might find yourself repeatedly drawn to partners who neglect you, or friends who betray you. At first, it feels like misfortune, but Jung would urge us to see the deeper pattern. Why do we find ourselves in these cycles? Because the psyche is trying to expose the wound, to make us aware of the shadow we carry. Until we face it, the same story replays itself, each time with a different character, each time inviting us to wake up. This is why Jung described neurosis, those subtle and sometimes crippling patterns of inner conflict, as the suffering of a soul which has not discovered its meaning. Emotional pain, when left unexplored, becomes a kind of spiritual stagnation. We remain stuck, spinning in circles. But when we bring meaning to it, when we ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" we take the first step toward breaking the cycle. Think of a person who grew up feeling abandoned. As an adult, they may unconsciously recreate situations that trigger abandonment, choosing unavailable partners, sabotaging their own relationships, or pushing others away before they get too close. Each painful moment reawakens the original wound. Yet beneath this repetition is the unconscious saying, "Look at me. Heal me. Integrate me." Here lies the spiritual principle again. Pain is not the enemy. It is a messenger. The cycle continues only when we refuse to listen. But when we turn toward it, when we allow it to speak, we begin to see that the wound itself carries the seed of transformation. Carl Jung often used the language of alchemy to describe this process. In alchemy, base metals are transformed into gold through fire. For Jung, the fire symbolized the intensity of suffering. Emotional pain, when endured with awareness, becomes the fire that transforms the soul. The gold that emerges is wisdom, maturity, and inner freedom. Without the fire, there is no transformation. Without suffering, there is no depth. This is why Jung insisted that there is no coming to consciousness without pain, but we resist this truth. The ego seeks comfort, certainty, and control. It does not want to face the unknown. Yet the unconscious thrives in mystery, in chaos, in the parts of life we cannot control. When life confronts us with loss, heartbreak, or failure, the ego feels crushed. But the soul, if we let it, expands in these very moments. Let's pause here and reflect again. Think of a time when emotional pain changed you, not immediately, not in the moment of despair, but afterward, when you looked back. Maybe a heartbreak forced you to grow in self-respect. Maybe a failure humbled you and gave you resilience. Maybe grief deepened your compassion for others. These are not accidents. They are examples of transformation through pain. And now I want to remind you, if these words are resonating, if you're beginning to see how your suffering might hold hidden meaning, stay with me. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, because what we're exploring is not common knowledge. It is wisdom that many overlook, but once understood, it changes the way you experience life itself. Let's go deeper. Jung spoke of the shadow as the parts of ourselves we deny or repress. Emotional pain is often the shadow's cry for attention. For example, a person who suppresses anger might constantly attract situations that provoke it. A person who hides vulnerability might repeatedly find themselves hurt by others' insensitivity. Each situation is a mirror, a reflection of what we refuse to own within ourselves. The cycle breaks when we reclaim these disowned parts. To acknowledge anger does not mean to act it out destructively. It means to accept it as part of being human. To admit vulnerability does not mean weakness. It means to live authentically. In reclaiming the shadow, we dissolve the unconscious compulsion that creates repetition. The pain transforms into power. Jung often guided his patients into dialogue with their inner world through dream analysis, active imagination, and symbolic exploration. Why? Because he knew that healing happens not by erasing pain, but by conversing with it, by allowing the unconscious to speak. A nightmare, for example, is not simply something to be avoided. It is a message. The frightening figure in the dream may represent a part of ourselves that we have rejected. If we dare to face it, to listen, it becomes less terrifying and more instructive. The same is true with emotional pain. When we confront it directly, whether through reflection, therapy, journaling, or meditation, we move closer to integration. And integration is the path out of cycles. Integration is what frees us from repeating the same story under different disguises. So let us bring this home. Right now, consider the shadow in your life. Where does emotional pain repeat itself most stubbornly? Where do you feel the same wounds surfacing again and again? This is your invitation. Instead of asking, "Why me?" begin to ask, "What is this showing me about myself?" That question alone is the doorway out of unconscious suffering. And if you've reached this point, I invite you again. Do not just passively listen. Take this seriously. Write it down, reflect, or meditate on it. Share this message with someone who might be stuck in their own cycle. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because what we are building here is a space where transformation is not just spoken about, lived. Remember, the principle is simple, but not easy. Emotional pain ends its cycle the moment it becomes conscious. That is Jung's gift to us, the realization that suffering is not meaningless punishment, but an invitation to wholeness. Think of a river. When it flows freely, it cleanses itself, it moves, it nourishes the land. But when something blocks its path, the water becomes stagnant, heavy, and even toxic. Emotional pain works the same way. When it is allowed to move through awareness, reflection, and integration, it flows and transforms us. But when it is resisted, denied, or repressed, it stagnates, repeating itself, becoming heavier with each cycle. Jung understood that most of us live with a dam in our psyche. We hold back the flow of emotions because we fear what might happen if we truly face them. We are afraid of being overwhelmed, of losing control, of being consumed by grief, anger, or despair. Yet it is precisely this resistance that makes pain unbearable. The more we fight it, the more it fights us back. What happens when we allow the river to flow? When we finally face the grief, the anger, the fear? Something remarkable. The energy that was trapped in suffering is released into creativity, insight, and growth. Jung noticed this in his patients. Those who dared to engage with their unconscious often found themselves becoming more alive, more authentic, more capable of love. The pain that once defined them became the very source of their transformation. To see this clearly, let's imagine a story. A man grows up in a household where his emotions are constantly dismissed. Every time he cries, he is told to be strong. Every time he expresses anger, he is punished. As an adult, he becomes detached, unable to connect deeply in relationships. He repeats the cycle. Partners complain that he is distant, he feels misunderstood, and he carries the same loneliness he felt as a child. One day, he begins to reflect on this pattern. He notices that every time someone gets close, he pushes them away. He asks himself, why? Slowly, memories emerge of his childhood, those moments of rejection, the fear of showing his true self. At first, this is painful. It feels like reopening old wounds. But through awareness, he begins to see the connection. The pain he carried was never fully felt, never fully accepted. By allowing it to surface, by grieving the loneliness he once buried, he begins to heal. And with healing comes the ability to open his heart again. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming whole by facing what we once rejected. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming real. Pain is not erased, but it is integrated. It no longer controls us unconsciously. It becomes part of the larger story of who we are. But why is this so hard for most of us? Because the ego resists surrender. The ego wants certainty, wants to avoid discomfort. The unconscious, however, thrives on paradox. It brings us face to face with what we fear, not to destroy us, but to expand us. Jung said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and he was right. To face the shadow, to sit with pain, to acknowledge the parts of ourselves we despise, that requires courage. Yet this courage is the key to breaking the cycle. When you accept yourself fully, even the angry parts, the grieving parts, the frightened parts, you take away the unconscious power those parts have over you. They no longer need to act out through repetition, because they have finally been seen. Let's go deeper into an example many of us can relate to: heartbreak. Almost everyone has experienced the collapse of a relationship. The initial pain feels unbearable, like part of our identity has been torn away. For some, this leads to a cycle jumping from relationship to relationship, repeating the same arguments, the same disappointments. Jung would say, this is the psyche's way of showing us an inner wound. Perhaps the heartbreak echoes an early experience of rejection, of not being enough, of being abandoned. Until that wound is faced, every new relationship becomes a stage where the same drama plays out. Breaking this cycle does not mean avoiding relationships. It means turning inward, asking, what is the pattern here? What part of myself am I refusing to see? Maybe it is the part that longs for validation, the part that fears abandonment, the part that feels unworthy of love. When we acknowledge these parts, when we embrace them with compassion, we no longer seek to heal them through another person. Instead, we begin to heal them within ourselves. And then, relationships transform. They become places of growth rather than repetition. This is why Jung emphasized symbols and dreams. The unconscious communicates through images, not logic. A dream of being lost, of being chased, of being trapped, these are not random. They are messages. They show us where we are stuck, where pain is unresolved. If we pay attention, they guide us toward healing. But if we ignore them, the message returns, often in the form of emotional pain in our waking life. Pause for a moment and reflect. What recurring dream or recurring emotional experience do you carry? Can you see it as a message rather than a curse? Can you imagine that your pain is not here to destroy you, but to guide you? This is the spiritual principle again. Pain is a doorway, not a prison dot, and if this perspective feels liberating, let me remind you, don't just listen and move on. Make this a practice. Begin journaling your patterns. Reflect on your dreams. Talk with someone about the pain you have avoided. These small steps are acts of courage. They open the door to freedom. If you're still with me here, it means you're serious about transformation. So I invite you, subscribe, share this journey with others, and commit to walking this path of awareness. Because the truth is, we need more people who are willing to break cycles, not only for themselves, but for the generations that follow. Jung believed that when one person faces their unconscious, they contribute to the healing of the collective. Every shadow integrated is not just a personal victory, it is a step toward collective evolution. Imagine a world where more people stopped projecting their pain onto others, where cycles of trauma were broken instead of repeated. That is not a fantasy. It begins with individuals like you right now, choosing awareness over avoidance. The cycle of emotional pain is not eternal. It breaks the moment you step into consciousness. That is the principle. That is the invitation. When Jung spoke about individuation, he was not describing a luxury for the few. He was pointing to a necessity for all of us. Without individuation, without bringing unconscious material into consciousness, we live fragmented lives. We move from one cycle of pain to another, never realizing that the key has always been within us. The spiritual principle that breaks the cycle is not hidden in some external system. It is the act of turning inward with honesty and courage. One of the most powerful ways this shows up is through projection. Jung observed that we often see in others what we cannot accept in ourselves. If we reject our own anger, we notice and despise it in others. If we deny our own vulnerability, we criticize it in those around us. This is not coincidence, it is the unconscious seeking recognition. Emotional pain often intensifies in relationships because other people become mirrors of our shadow. Imagine a woman who constantly feels criticized by her partner. She believes he is judgmental, harsh, and controlling. Yet as she reflects more deeply, she begins to realize that these qualities also exist within her own inner dialogue. She judges herself harshly every day. The partner's behavior, though real, is magnified by the mirror of her own inner critic. By recognizing this projection, by owning the shadow of self-judgment, she begins to release the cycle. The emotional pain loses its grip because the unconscious content is no longer hidden. This insight can feel uncomfortable. It requires us to admit that we are not only victims of circumstance, but also participants in our suffering. Not because we deserve pain, but because our unconscious seeks wholeness. It repeats the lesson until it is learned. And when it is learned, the cycle breaks. Jung used the term synchronicity to describe meaningful coincidences, moments where inner experience and outer events align. Often, our cycles of pain are marked by synchronicity. We meet the same type of person, encounter the same disappointment, or find ourselves in familiar conflicts. At first, it feels random. But if we pay attention, we realize these are opportunities for growth. The universe, or the psyche itself, is arranging these experiences not to punish us, but to guide us. Think of a person who continually struggles with abandonment. They may meet one partner after another who eventually leaves. On the surface, this seems cruel. But beneath the surface, the psyche is staging these experiences to bring the wound of abandonment into full awareness. Each heartbreak is a synchronicity, a symbolic repetition that says, this pain is asking to be healed. If the person ignores it, the cycle continues. If they face it, the cycle dissolves. And this is why Jung saw the process of healing as both psychological and spiritual. To face the unconscious is not just self-help, it is a sacred act. It is a reconciliation with the deepest truths of our being. Emotional pain is not random. It is archetypal. It belongs to the great human journey, where each of us is called to transform suffering into wisdom. Now, consider the role of creativity in this transformation. Jung himself painted, carved, and wrote as a way of engaging with his unconscious. He encouraged patients to draw their dreams, to act out their inner conflicts, to give form to what was hidden. Why? Because creativity allows the unconscious to express itself without censorship. Art, music, storytelling, these are not just hobbies. They are bridges between the conscious and the unconscious. They are ways of allowing pain to flow, to find shape, to transform. Think of how many great works of art have come from suffering. Music born from heartbreak, paintings born from despair, literature born from loss. These are not accidents. They are examples of pain transformed into beauty, shadow turned into gold. Each of us has this potential. We do not need to become famous artists. But by writing in a journal, sketching our feelings, or even speaking them aloud, we give the unconscious a voice. And when the unconscious is heard, it no longer needs to repeat the same painful story. Let's make this practical. Tonight, when you are alone, take a pen and paper. Write about the one emotional pain that keeps returning in your life. Do not filter yourself. Let the words flow. If tears come, let them come. If anger rises, let it rise. This is not weakness. This is integration. By expressing the pain consciously, you free yourself from its unconscious repetition. And if you are finding value here, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, how many people in my life are trapped in cycles of emotional pain? How many could be freed by simply learning to face their suffering with awareness? Share this with them. Invite them into this conversation. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because what we are exploring here is not just theory. It is the beginning of a collective shift. Now, let's explore another aspect: generational patterns. Jung understood that the unconscious is not only individual, but also collective. Families, cultures, and societies carry unresolved shadows that are passed down. A child may inherit the fears, traumas, and unfulfilled dreams of their parents. Emotional pain, in this sense, is sometimes not entirely ours. It is the echo of generations. Consider a family where silence is the rule. Pain is never spoken of, vulnerability is hidden, emotions are suppressed. Each generation learns this pattern, and each carries the weight of unspoken suffering. But then, one person chooses differently. One person begins to ask questions, to speak openly, to break the silence. That person becomes the cycle breaker. Their courage not only heals them, but shifts the trajectory for future generations. This is the power of making the unconscious conscious on a collective level. And this, again, is the principle. Pain that is faced stops repeating. Pain that is avoided continues. Whether on an individual or generational scale, the truth remains the same. So let's return to you. What cycles have you inherited? What emotional burdens in your life feel older than you, almost as if they were passed down? Reflect on this. Write it down. And then choose. Choose to face it, to integrate it, to stop it from passing further. This choice, though deeply personal, is also profoundly spiritual. It is how healing ripples outward. Remember, Jung never promised that facing the unconscious would be easy. He promised that it would be transformative. The process often feels like chaos, like confusion, like descending into darkness. But out of that descent comes rebirth. The seed must break for the plant to grow. The night must come before the dawn. Emotional pain must be faced before freedom is found. And if you are still here, still listening, it means something inside you knows this truth. You are ready, or at least willing to begin. So once again, I invite you, subscribe, commit, share this with others. Because the more of us who take this journey, the more cycles of suffering we break, not only for ourselves, but for the world. We have traveled far together in this reflection. From the first recognition that emotional pain repeats itself, to the deeper understanding that it is not random but meaningful. From the recognition of shadow and projection, to the realization that our suffering is often inherited, carried across generations, waiting for someone to face it with courage. And all along, Carl Jung's wisdom has guided us. The unconscious will direct our lives until we make it conscious. And what we call fate is often nothing more than the shadow seeking recognition. So let us pause and gather the threads. What is the spiritual principle that breaks the cycle of emotional pain? It is awareness, radical, honest, unflinching awareness. Not awareness as an intellectual knowledge, but awareness as lived experience. The willingness to sit with grief instead of running from it, to listen to anger instead of denying it, to embrace fear instead of numbing it. Awareness is the light that dissolves repetition. Pain becomes unbearable only when we resist it. But when we turn toward it, when we give it space, something shifts. The pain does not vanish immediately, but it changes form. It becomes information, guidance, even energy for transformation. Jung compared this to alchemy, the base metal of suffering transformed into the gold of wisdom. Without the fire of pain, no transformation is possible. But with awareness, the fire refines us instead of consuming us. This truth may sound simple, but living it is the hardest work of all. It means breaking the automatic reactions we have built over years. It means refusing to project our wounds onto others. It means choosing, again and again, to look inward rather than blame outward. And it means surrendering to the mystery of the unconscious, trusting that what rises in the dark is not there to destroy us, but to expand us. Think of your life now. What cycles do you carry? What wounds return, again and again? What stories do you find yourself repeating? These are not coincidences. They are invitations. Each repetition is the psyche saying, look here, heal this, integrate this. The moment you face it, the moment you allow awareness to illuminate it, the cycle begins to dissolve. This is not about erasing pain. Pain will always be a part of life. But suffering, the endless repetition, the unconscious entanglement that can end. Suffering ends when we learn from pain, when we allow it to transform us instead of trap us. And perhaps this is what Jung wanted us to remember most, that wholeness is possible. Not perfection, not eternal happiness, but wholeness. A life where every part of us, the light and the shadow, the joy and the pain, is welcomed and integrated. A life where we no longer flee from ourselves but live fully, courageously, authentically. If you have listened this far, then you know this message was meant for you. Something in you is ready to step out of the cycle, to stop repeating and start transforming. That choice is yours, and it begins now with awareness, with compassion, with courage. So I ask you, do not let this be just another video you watch and forget. Take this principle and live it. Reflect on your patterns. Journal your recurring pain. Notice your projections. Face your shadow. And when the next wave of suffering comes, and it will pause, breathe, step back into awareness. Say to yourself, this is not my enemy. This is my teacher. If this journey has resonated with you, if you feel the call to live more consciously, then take action now. Subscribe to this channel, because we will continue to explore these truths, to walk this path of transformation together. Share this message with someone who might need it, because cycles of pain are broken not only for ourselves but for the people around us. And leave a comment below. Tell us what cycle you are ready to break, what shadow you are willing to face. You never know how your words might inspire someone else. This is how we grow, not in isolation, but in community. By facing our unconscious, by breaking cycles of pain, we contribute to something larger than ourselves. We bring healing not only to our own lives but to the collective. This is Jung's gift to us, and it is now your gift to carry forward. So let us close here with a reminder. Emotional pain is not a punishment. It is an invitation. It is the voice of the unconscious calling you toward wholeness. The cycle ends the moment you listen, the moment you bring awareness, the moment you choose courage over avoidance. That choice is yours, today, in this very moment. And as you step forward, may you remember this. Your pain does not define you. Your willingness to transform it does. That is the spiritual principle. That is the path to freedom. That is how the cycle breaks.